Welcome to the Center for Transformation Institute podcast, where we are uniting with therapists everywhere for personal and professional growth. Your journey starts here at the place therapists grow.
Margaret, it's so good to be with you again.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so glad we've gotten connected. I know that I wanted to connect with you for quite some time. And there's so many people that you know that I know. And I've said, can you help me get connected to Margaret? I would love to have a conversation with Margaret. And so we finally got connected last month, and I'm so glad that we did. Thank you so much.
I am too. I had no idea what you were doing. And of course, as a therapist, I mean, a retired therapist, but I wish I had known about all of this back when I was doing therapy way back in the day. Um, so to be able to help current day therapists incorporate these things that have changed in my life would be a privilege.
Well, I just was so blessed by our first conversation and how you said, how much you want to support us in this mission, because that means a lot coming from you, knowing all the work that you've done to implement the model and to kind of further the model with the work that you've done, and just all the wisdom and experience and maturity that you bring to the table. It means so much to me. It really helps me to feel validated, that we're on the right path and that the Lord's going to bring help along the way. So with that,
Yeah.
tell everyone who you are and what you do and where you come from and all of that.
Well, I have a very long story. I mean, I will try to make it short, but I started out as a registered nurse. I graduated from nursing school in 1967. That gives you a little clue. And then I went to grad school to become a clinical psychotherapist in the, let's see, 80s.
Okay.
So I got my master's degree. And I realized that that was really what I wanted most, was not just the healing of the body, but the healing of the emotions, because I needed that. Okay, so I know one of the things you're targeting, which I appreciate so much, is the personal healing and growth of the therapist.
Yes.
That doesn't happen in grad school.
Mhm.
It's so many therapists never find a context for that to happen, you know? And anyway, I know that I was a very wounded person, very wounded. I started out as a very much a trauma. I came from a good Christian family, committed Christians, wounded parents, World War II generation wounded parents, no healing for their trauma. And the relationship aspect of Christianity never came through to me. I'm not saying it never did to anyone back in the 40s and 50s, but it never came through to me. And so I left when when I was 20. I just left the faith. But that was the thing for me, was relationship.
Yes.
I was desperate for relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I went on a very weird, long journey in my 20s of all the weird things that were available in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. And really, honestly, only came back to the Lord because God spoke to me. So this whole journey for me has been about relationship. And that is why my focus has been, my career focus has been on developing relationship with God, self, and others. So that's, you asked in one of your questions, how did I find the life model? In my desperate search for my own healing. I was first connected through Immanuel prayer, because I lived in the Chicago suburbs, and I found out about Karl Lehman, who lived in a adjacent suburb. And so I had been teaching Theophostic, actually, and I found it to be, I was teaching prayer ministers. That was my heart. I wanted church prayer ministers to be attuning to the person they were praying for. And I wasn't seeing that happen. I was seeing a lot of prayer on them and for them, but not connected to them in the context that I was in. So that was my passion. And I found a lot of good material and good practices in Theophostic. And so I started training. I started a training program.
Okay.
And that's really my passion, is to train others. That's what I do. So, but I found Immanuel in the process of that. And I realized, with a blinding realization, that starting with connection was better than starting with trauma.
Yes. Yes.
That was the turning point.
Yes.
Now, I go back a long way, and I go back to the 70s in my career, the 60s and 70s, where we were trying to actually traumatize people into getting well. I know that sounds crazy, but we were doing all-nighters, break down people's defenses. It was a model, a very, very broken model of the 60s and 70s. And it was all about the more you pushed people into their trauma, the better that they would. I know it sounds crazy when I say it, but in some ways we've been so trauma focused all along the psychology path.
Yes.
We've been trauma focused. I started out my own healing, trying to dig up my trauma and get it healed. As a therapist, we spent a lot of time. Well, people walk in, you immediately focus on what's wrong. And that was what was going on in the prayer ministry world also. It's like, let's go to your worst memories, let's find what's wrong, and then invite Jesus into that. Well, that worked to some extent, but I realized when I found Immanuel that it was a re-traumatization theme.
Okay.
Without meaning to.
Yes.
It isn't just that we're focusing on trauma, it's that we're not balancing it
Right.
with connection. We weren't balancing it. And it was like, well, I remember when I listened to my first Jim Wilder talk. This goes way back, probably into the 90s, where he gave a talk at the Christian Counselor Association or something. Someone had given me, you know how you get something, a book or a DVD or something, and you stick it on the shelf and you just forget about it, and then God goes, right there, look, look, look. I listened to that, and I probably spent most of the time just crying, because it explained my experience, my trauma, my lack of connection.
Mm.
And that was the huge, huge turning point for me.
Okay.
I'll never forget that feeling of realizing what had happened to me in my good Christian home, where I wasn't sexually abused or beaten or anything, and I ended up so broken.
Yes.
Okay. So, Immanuel prayer. I switched my training program. This goes back into the 90s. I switched my training program from Theophostic to Immanuel prayer. And by this time I was retired from psychotherapy, so I just threw myself into it 100%. And so there was no curriculum. So I wrote a curriculum for training Immanuel prayer ministers.
Mm.
And that's been since 2010. That's been my primary focus. So that's how I learned about the life model. That's a little bit of my story.
That was really helpful to hear. I know you told me a little bit about it at the first session or the first time we met. But this was more detail. I didn't realize you were a nurse before and that you would come into it. And I think I had told you that had done some theophostic training as well. Now, much later, it would have been more like 2007, I think, when I came across it, but it was much before Life Model because I didn't come across Life Model until 2014.
Oh, wow.
I know. Quite a while. So you have a lot of history. And I think something that's really important this portion of a conversation, I think, is to understand for us just to put out there what your organization is, what you do now, because I know that you're more in a advisory role at this point. However, we haven't mentioned that yet, and I think it's important.
Okay. Well, actually, my husband and I started a nonprofit called Alive and Well way back before I really knew, before either of us were retired, and before we knew really what God wanted to do with it. But through Alive and Well was when that was the vehicle for my training program, Theophostic, and then Immanuel. So I had a group that I was living in Wheaton, Illinois, and I had a group of people the Lord gave me just awesomely, the way he gathers people around you and I trained them to help me train others.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very strong training ethic, and that is that the prayer ministry, whatever it is, but not for me, it's Immanuel. You can't learn to do something like that without feedback.
Right.
And frankly, a lot of us therapists go out there after grad school and don't ever have enough feedback or clinical, real clinical training. And I have a passion. This is a clinical skill. In other words, it's hands-on, interactive with people. And so my training program from the start, even with Theophostic, was designed for there to be trained mentors working with a smaller group of students. The students are practicing, the mentors are giving them feedback.
Mm.
And that's what our Immanuel Encounter program does today. I call it the Immanuel Encounter. It's, I have uniquenesses, I have similarities to other people who train in Immanuel prayer, and we have uniquenesses. And so I wanted to just have a unique identity. So it's called the Immanuel Encounter. And it's primarily because Immanuel is a person, not a technique. And so we are guiding people into an encounter with Jesus. And it changes their lives. And it's changed my life. The Lord has now brought other people around me to be part of the training. And I'm able at this age to, as you said, be an advisor. So that's what Alive and Well is. But we don't do just Immanuel training. We have many, at this point, products or like journey groups, which is Amy Brown Glazer has journey groups. She brought journey groups into Alive and Well, praise God. And then she also designs workshops and processes for people to practice the life model over time with a safe cohort of people where they are literally living it out in a way that's extremely transformative and life-giving.
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you for saying that. Think that alivewell.org, correct, is the website. And there's a lot of resources. That's where therapists can access the trainings,
Yes.
the training
Yes.
that you have videoed. It's yourself doing the training, I think.
Myself and Jessica Handy Duesberg, who was my partner up there in Wheaton, and unbelievably wonderful woman. This is what I would say to your therapists. It's really important to have this kind of small group, interactive, mentored experience because this life model thing is a huge ball of info. It's hard to get your hands around it when you first get introduced to it. It's hard to even know exactly what the core of it is. And so one of the things that I did when I designed what I call the lifestyle, the Immanuel Encounter Lifestyle Program, is to try to bring the essence of the life model and the Immanuel Encounter process together in an introductory form.
Okay.
And it's also the prerequisite for training people to actually be guides, train them. So people who want to just try to get their hands around the life model in an interactive way and also get introduced to how we do Immanuel encounters. That's what the first program is. It's introductory. And then we take people who really feel called to lead others and we train them an intensive training of 10 weeks with guidance, with mentors, trained mentors. And that's my joy, because to be able to be so attuned to Jesus and to this other person that you can lead them into a life-changing encounter with the living God is, to me, the best thing I've ever done. It's so awesome.
Yes, you have such a gentle approach, and it's evident that you've had just years of synchronizing with the Holy Spirit to lead people into this healing process. And so it's wonderful to have you putting your voice and your thoughts out there to us as therapists, because I think as a Christian therapist, who doesn't want this, right? This is what we want to do. We want to carry Jesus with us, and we want to transfer that love and healing to our clients, and facilitate an open door for the client to experience everything that the Lord has for their healing and their understanding of what it is to live an Immanuel lifestyle and continued community with the Holy Spirit.
Immanuel lifestyle, in a nutshell, is developing the kind of connection with Jesus and with yourself, because if we're totally out of connection with ourselves, really hard to connect with Jesus. But to be so attuned that when we go off the rails, which we will,
Right.
we can more quickly over time, every bit of experience and practice gets us reconnected more quickly. I like to say that when we're working this program, we spend less time messed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the goal. The goal
Fewer
isn't
and farther
perfection.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I that's what I say oftentimes to people. It's not, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for more time in between times of feeling disconnected, and that it's less intense, less intense and more distant. So, when I think about what you're saying and the modules that we're creating for the life model informed therapy curriculum, one, probably it's going to be at least two of the modules are going to be committed to Immanuel lifestyle, right? And so there's the meditative life that is our individual commitment. And then there's this healing process, right? That you have taken to the next level with the Immanuel encounter. And I believe that we're going to spend at least one module just utilizing what you have come up with, what Dr. Lehman has come up with, and getting the two of you to inform us, and definitely wanting the therapists who are getting into the model to take your trainings as well, but giving them a taste in our modules so that they can get their continuing education credits as well, that's what I've found as something that's really missing with the model, is that therapists may not have the time or the energy because they're also having to go get these continuing education credits to renew their licensure, so they're like, I can't come up with this other training that isn't giving me this. And so we said, hey, we'll solve that problem.
Well, that's miraculous. I'm super excited about that. And there will be some of your therapists who go through your model who want to specifically upgrade their skills for guiding people into this encounter. And it's what we do is both profound and simple.
Yes.
It's a beautiful process of reflection and attunement, and it doesn't take, it's not like gymnastics or a lot of fancy whatever it is, but it is specific in the ways that we guide people.
Yes.
Because what we want to do is help them go deeper within themselves and not intrude on that, and not do Jesus' job.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Not do Jesus' job, but help people open up their capacity to sense him and receive from him.
So truly, the therapist becomes a facilitator of the great counselor.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yes. And back up and let him do his work, right?
I'm telling you, I was a pretty good therapist, but he is way better.
Well, I remember being in a training, and one of the trainees with me said, what I think about is the word weight behind the client's head. Why am I talking? I thought that is a really, as we mature in our skills, we realize how much we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And how much we need to sit and be and I think synchronize with the client in the situation, and hear from the spirit, what is next and what do you want me to do? And so what I hear you saying with this is that it is a skill. There is a need for the training. But when you learn the skill, you'll find that it's not too hard to implement, right? That it's not too hard to learn, it's not too hard to implement. And especially because it's about, if you're living an Immanuel lifestyle, then you're navigating facilitating the process with that direction. And of course, he's so caring about each of us and wants us all to be healed. So he wants the people in front of us to get this.
Yes, you're getting it. And I would be over the moon to be training therapists to do this. I mean, that would be, I'm getting to the place where I'm not going to be able to do this kind of thing anymore. And I would love to spend my last push doing this.
Well, what I'm hoping is that, we want these 8 modules to get underway. We're done filming the first module. So that's awesome. We hope for it to come to market in the fall, as the editing process is going to take the next several months. And then we have, I think, the Immanuel lifestyle is, I think, the third and fourth module. So, Yes, we'll be in talks about how we're going to be facilitating that as Immanuel gives us wisdom.
You know, one of your questions, you know, that you gave me for this talk was, what is so profound about this thing, you know?
Yes.
And I think one of the thing that I want to highlight is that it's maturation and growth focused instead of trauma focused. And that is very important for therapists, even though we're trained to handle brokenness. That's why people come to us, is because they're wounded, they're broken.
Mhm.
But if all we do is work with them on their brokenness, they're not growing necessarily. You know, the idea, and this is what Jim Wilder gave us, was, and as a therapist he was working with some of the most broken, and
Yeah.
I'm sure the Lord gave him this, that what's needed the most is maturation emotionally and relationally, because otherwise we just leave people with maybe a little less overwhelmed by their trauma. But what we all need, what I needed terribly, was emotional and relational growth
Right.
and maturation. And the life model has much to offer us on that front. And
Yeah.
I don't think that that's out of place in a therapy context. I think that it's what we really should be doing, because if we want to turn out people who are more whole because they were with us,
Yeah.
that's what we want to focus on, is what are the gaps, maturity gaps. That's
Yeah.
a profound piece of knowledge, maturity gaps, to help people. And when people start dealing with their growth and maturity needs, that's when they deal with the blockages to that. Instead of just like, okay, let's go for your worst memories.
Right.
It's like, let's look at where you need to grow and what's hindering that growth.
Yes. Yes.
It's a paradigm shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I've noticed, and I think this is why we get confused when we start drinking through the fire hose of life model and what is life model, is that the three pillars as outlined in Joyce Arts here, multi-generational community, Immanuel lifestyle, and the relational brain skills, they all interact with one another. They're not, and that's what I've spoken in the first module, is like, they're not mutually exclusive, right? And so what you'll notice, as what I've said in the module filming last week, was what you'll notice as I start to unpack each of the pillars, how they connect with one another. So there is repetition between, and I love how you're articulating it right now, because you're bringing out to the forefront the imperative of maturity, right? That maturity is this conceptualization that, while it's one of the relational brain skills, right? It's throughout Immanuel lifestyle as well, right? And throughout multi-generational community, it points back. And as we kind of navigate the checklist or the chart that was in the first, life model, Living from the Heart book, as we navigate that, it brings to surface the healing process that the Lord has for us. I am so thrilled that Wilder is doing the rewriting the maturity book now.
It's been needed. Yes, it needs to be focused on. And boy, what a paradigm shift it would be for therapists to embed emotional healing in the maturational model. In other words, like I said, instead of going directly for the pain, you go for the growth, and
Yeah.
you deal with the pain that's impeding the growth. And you do it within a context of connection.
Love that.
This is something that is
Right.
more profound than you can imagine just studying it until you've experienced it, as I have both in my own life and in training others. I have been watching, there are people I've been with for 14 years, and I've watched this model change their lives. It's connection is what we were made for. Joy, connection, joy. This is one thing we learned when studying the brain skills, is that the brain works best in an environment of joy. Well, it's a simple practice, really, and you start a therapy session with getting people connected. Instead of, they walk in pain, you deal with their pain, they walk out in pain. You know, I mean, it's connection is a key. It is a key.
Right.
And we have practices, some of them very simple practices, to activate the connection. There are people who, I was one of them actually, as I did not know how to connect. And as a result, I was free floating. I was just unconnected and free floating through my childhood, through my adulthood. I was a danger to myself and others. And I had to learn, I had to develop the actual brain circuitry to connect. Now we have the privilege and the information and the context in therapy to help people do that.
Right.
They come, they sit, we're there, they're right there, they're asking for help.
Right.
And we could help them develop the capacity to connect.
Yes.
And then we deal with whatever stands in the way of that when it becomes apparent. Here's the other thing that I've learned. I am so adamant about this. I've learned that Jesus is the best one to know what he has prepared a person for at any given time. We cannot push beyond where beyond what that person is ready to receive.
Yes.
Well, we aren't smart enough to know that. And so the more we get people connected to Jesus, and we attune to what Jesus is doing, he will deal with exactly the sweet spot of what they need at that time. And it takes the onus off us to be, the wise God who knows what they need right at that moment. It's such a shift from the burden that therapists carry to heal people. Yes. And it brings it, and if your people are privileged enough to be able to bring Jesus into a therapy context, and I know not everyone can. I mean, you can lose your license over it in some contexts.
Yeah.
But if there's even any chance that they can involve Jesus, even if they themselves are attuning to Jesus and knowing, okay, I'm going to take this one step and don't go one step farther because it's just not going to help. And when we do Immanuel encounters, we know that even if the person knows what they think they need, Jesus knows what they really need.
Right.
And I've watched that as I've worked with people over time. He's preparing the ground. He's preparing their connection circuits. What he does the most,
yes,
is connects people at the heart to himself.
Yeah.
And then he does these amazing things within the context of the connection that bring the thing that they need, many times without ever going to negative memories. It's just the most powerful thing I've ever seen.
Fabulous. Not re-traumatizing.
Oh, exactly. No, I'm not saying he doesn't work with pain.
Right.
But we don't, we're very careful not to go with people into their pain unless they're connected.
Unless they're connected. And I think, and I know we're almost out of time, but I think I heard you say prior to us talking about, on the recording, was just that this idea of synchronizing with the nervous system of the client, right? that life model has so much to do with not overwhelming the nervous system, synchronizing. And I think as a practice director, who I'm training and working with and supervising clinicians, I'm speaking that concept to the clinicians a lot as well. Like, we need to synchronize with where the client is, right? And I love what you were saying about even with non-Christian clients or situations where we can't say the name of Jesus per se, right? Or say this is what's happening. We are carrying the Spirit of God inside of us, and it's emitting from us. I mean, that is the right brain psychotherapy, right? That is the energy that's emitting from us. And people say, I don't know, I really like coming to see you, or I like being in your room. What is this? This is so different. Like, I know what it is. I know what it is.
Well, I know we have to stop, and we could go on and on and on, but we can talk again, and I would love to be involved in any way that I can with these modules that try to help people understand, help therapists understand the power of connection to the healing process, the power of maturational context, all of these things. It would be my passion and privilege to help with that.
It's such an honor, Margaret. You are a wonderful communicator. I just wanted to speak that identity to you as you've been speaking today. My mind is saying, whoa, this is just an amazing ability. You have an amazing ability to articulate this depth of conceptualization for us as therapists. Some of the things you're saying, I'm learning in some higher level trainings that I'm doing for dissociation recently. I already had this figured out. The Holy Spirit already told her. So I'm just could not be more thrilled to have you as a part of what we're doing. So just honor the work that the Lord has had you doing these many decades. And we have a sense of kind of taking a baton from you, a leg of it at least. And we could not be more honored to be in that process with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Place Therapists Grow. We hope you will join us next Monday. To expand your knowledge and continue your growth journey, go to cftinstitute.com and take our assessment. See you next time.